WNST, my mom and her memory and honoring her over the weekend. We had a lot of folks stop by the old Connolly Funeral Home down there in Essex on Mesa Avenue. This guy was one of them. I did offer him some beer and some Bud Light in the corner, but I probably would have been better off offering him cheese, which he also has great disdain for. But Alan McCallum does love the Baltimore Orioles, and I'd say ain't the beer cold right now, but it's a little flat around Oriole Park here as the Orioles entertain the Oakland A's. Alan, they've, other than hitting the grand slam for my mom on Friday night with Machado, this is when they're supposed to be getting hot, and this is quickly trending in the wrong direction.
Well, while I was at the wake on Friday, and I do want to offer my condolences to you again. Your mom was an amazing woman. Someone said, "What's big week for the Orioles? Big homestand for the Orioles?" And I was like, "No, it's not," because for the last 2 months or so, you keep hearing, "Oh well, they've got 80 games, they've got 60 games, they've got 50 games, and now they've got 40 games." Well, before they went on the road trip, that was a big road trip, and that actually was where they had an opportunity, and they're mathematically still in the wild card hunt. That's clear. But they needed to go make hay against some clubs that the Mariners and the Angels are not so different from them, where they're okay clubs, but they're flawed. And the Oakland A's are just bad. And they needed to go out and do 8-2, 7-3, 6-4 at best, or at worst, to make up some ground here. And they came back 4-6. And I heard a couple people say something like, well, they've got 16 out of the next 19 at home. They need to win. Someone said, "Oh, well, they need to go 11-8." Well, they came back to Baltimore 3 games under 500. 11-8 puts them at 500 after 20 games from then. They needed to go something like 15-4 in the next 19 games to even be in a position to really talk about not just being over 500, not just being in position in the wild card, but to leapfrog some of these clubs that are chasing the wild card with them. And let's not forget that, not only is this a West Coast trip, the Angels and the Mariners are in this thing. And pretty much most of the teams they need to compete against over the next little stretch here, they're going to be playing. So
and these West Coast teams are now the teams in the driver's seat because Toronto has fallen backward yet again, and Tampa's been horrible. This has been a bad stretch for all of these teams. It feels like the wild card is going to come out of another division at this point, right?
Well, one of them, anyway. The Yankees right now are seem to be in decent position, but in the number 1 spot. But, the Mariners, the Angels, and the Twins, in the Central, the Twins have been playing well as well. So, all of these, there are other clubs that are taking far more advantage. And the Orioles are a club that, since their 22-10 start, have been a bad club. And I said to you last time we spoke that it made no sense to make the decision they made at the All-Star break because time was short, that this was the club they put together, and they put together a club that, from a starting pitching standpoint, is far under par. And that includes the decision not to do anything to try and augment Tillman, knowing that he was hurt at the end of the year, knowing that he was hurt in December, and they didn't know
they gave the ball again on Sunday, man. They're going to keep going back to that, and every time I see Gausman or I see Gausman struggle, I realize, hey, dude, he's going to get 34 starts here next year. It doesn't matter. Same thing with Bundy. They're going to give him the ball. I don't know if he get 34 starts. Obviously they've worked Gausman harder than the rest of these guys, but they've done nothing at all to replace the bottom of the rotation beyond Hellickson, and that hasn't been all that great. You look at, they're going to play the Red Sox this weekend, and they're sending Jimenez and Tillman out there to face these teams. I don't know how you expect it to go or why you would expect it to go better than, quite frankly, it did over the first 100 games.
And let's not forget, as much as we talk about the starting pitching, this offense has been up and down all year. Through most of the season, Scope and Mancini have been the 2 bats that have really sort of held this club together. Manny Machado's gotten hot for the first time all year in the second half. And the acquisition of Tim Beckham has really covered up some things right now. But Scope and Mancini are starting to slow down for the first time. Mancini's average has dropped from 300 to 287. Probably just because he's tired. This is his first year being in the Buck. Well, you're essential now, so we're going to play you until you're dead.
Yeah, he's got 400 at-bats under his belt, and it's not September, sure.
Right. And they're still trying to get what they can out of Trumbo and Davis, who aren't the players that Trumbo had never been the player he was last year and isn't now, and Davis has been on decline for the last few years here. So, I mean, the offense is assisting in this as well. I mean, they have a club that is deficient, and now they don't have 60 games. They don't have 50 games. Now they're closer to 35. And there is no clock in baseball, but the calendar at this point in the season plays the role of the clock. And I don't know who they've gotten through waivers at this point, but they have another opportunity to trade some guys. And if they have any smarts at all, if they can get Britton through, if they can get an O'Day through, who's been okay, certainly hasn't been what he once was. If they can get somebody through and get something for it, particularly starting pitching for the coming season, they need to do it because, and this is important. I mean, this is why making this decision is what the decision they made was foolish. You want to know how teams get plunged into 14 years of losing? You take a club whose window is closing, you convince yourself that you are a contender when you're not, and instead of moving players and contracts for payroll flexibility or opportunities to open up spots for young guys coming up, or to get something from another organization that you need in the long term, and you let those moments pass, and you end up at the end of the line with used up players, contracts that expire,
and your four games under 500. Put that in there too. Yes,
and getting nothing for the guys that you could have moved to help you in the future. That's how clubs plunge themselves into 14 losing seasons of baseball.
Well, but this organization has never, ever done that. This is the one time they had to sell off under Sid Thrift, which is 16 years ago now, if you do the math on that. And it was good to see Mike Messina back in town over the weekend as one of the guys who was part of that, as well as B.J. Suroff and a bunch of other guys that in that era disappeared. I don't know when Adam Jones is going to disappear here. I know Chris Davis isn't going to disappear here. And, I also know that the clock is already ticking on Scope as to what they're going to do long term, because they are getting to the point where if they don't get something done with him in the next 12 to 16 months, he'll be out the back door as well. And look, and Machado, I want to get on to Machado here, Alan, because, he has heated up. He's, his stats are representative now that he's had this kind of an incredible August. But, there was the getting caught on the base paths, and he and Scope, and he's fingering Scope all the way back to the dugout. And, and then the ball, and then he boots a ball the next inning. It wasn't the reason they lost the game on Sunday, but he's not a kid I'm giving $300 million to. I'm sorry, I'm just not.
I've been saying this to you for a while, and after he hit the grand slam on Friday night, third grand slam in 11 days, and I've said to a lot of people recently that I wouldn't give him money, and people are like, "You're saying, Alan?" Look, Manny Machado is maybe the most naturally gifted player I've personally ever seen come out of the Orioles system.
Fair enough.
Cal is my favorite player all time. I wasn't alive when Frank and Brooks were in their heyday. I remember Eddie Murray, and I certainly old enough to remember him playing. But just in terms of natural gifts, Manny Machado is one of the elite in the game. Period.
You know what? When you mention guys ever, I would put like even a Jeffrey Hammonds into the middle of that as far as potential, right? Like
sure.
to be that kind of player. And for Machado, it's worked out. I mean, despite all of the problems that he's had psychologically and slumps and bad knees and, all of that stuff, he still is a guy somebody's going to give $200 million to. I just don't know if it's going to be us.
No, I mean, he's done way more than Jeffrey Hammond did with his talent at this point. I mean, Manny's one of the best players in the game. He's the best defense. Look, I didn't see Brooks. I don't remember Brooks. He's the best defensive third baseman I've ever seen. And you're right. I mean, his numbers at the end of the season are going to be right about average, except for maybe the average where you expect them to be. I get what Manny Machado can be, but I will say this to you again. To give $300 million to a player on a club that is not the Yankees and not the Dodgers and not even the Texas Rangers, where, you know, you've got a massive media market potential, a club that routinely cries poor and calls itself a mid-market, to give that kind of money to a player, even your own, he needs to be everything. Mentally tough, the best player on the field. He can't go through a 3-month slump, where you don't think it's an aberration. You're not sure what's going on, and you're not sure that you're not going to see that again. I mean, players slump. I get that, but he went through half the season where he looked like he had no idea what was going on at the plate, a significant portion of the time. And then, as you said, I mean, Cal Ripken was at his best half as fast as Manny Machado, and I'd rather have Cal or J.J. Hardy today running the bases, because they're not going to make dumb mistakes on the bases. They're not going to lose their temper in situations, or their cool in moments when the club can't afford to have them do it. And so there's so many things about Manny, as good as he is, and he's as good as anybody. I take nothing away, but to give someone $300 million means they need to be the elite in every sense of what that word means all the time. And because you essentially you're going to put him at the center of the realm, so to speak, and then everybody else has to be inexpensive to make it work. And the Orioles really aren't good at that, Ness. They're not. I'm not saying they don't do more with less, but
under Buck, but who knows where's Buck Showalter is going to be in 16 months, right?
Right. I mean, but to do it with that kind of albatross around your neck, that kind of salary, that's really tough. And I just don't see how that's going to work. And to be in a situation at the end of 2018 where Manny Machado and Zach Britton simply walk away, and all you get for them are draft picks, that's how you fall into 14 years of losing.
Well, and also, if you haven't won because of them recently, and we are getting up onto the point here where it's feeling like the witching hour, and I've talked to Luke about this earlier this week, like, are they even going to be in the race when the Ravens kick off against Cincinnati, or is their season really going to be over? And it's really trended poorly this week specifically, because coming home is supposed to fix them, right? I mean, literally playing at home, there are 600-plus teams statistically. This was going to be the week that they're going to get well. Now, they're going to go to Boston this weekend. They still have a big stretch of games here at home over the next 2 weeks, but this had to be the get well.
Yeah, and I'll say again, I mean, the Angels are not so different from them. Probably the Mariners are a better comparison. Because the Mariners' pitching is really suspect right now, particularly with the injuries they have. The Angels' pitching is a little better than the Orioles, and it showed up. Not necessarily the bullpen, but from the starting pitching standpoint, and it held the Orioles' offense down enough to beat them 4 out of 6 games. They needed to come home and hit a lot of home runs, and they did it in one day, on one night, and then they didn't do it the other 2 games. And that was pretty much the story of the West Coast, right? I mean, they would play well in 1 out of 3 or 2 out of 4, and fall asleep after that. It's not that this is a bad club, Ness. They're just not a consistent, well put together club. And I've said it again, it's easy to have home runs disguise the weaknesses in this offense. They need to reshape this offense and the way it approaches taking at bats. I will never understand the philosophy of putting home run hitters in Camden Yards. Home run hitters, everybody becomes a home run hitter potentially at Camden Yards. Everybody. So why not put 300 hitters who hit the gaps that play so much better on the road in Camden Yards, where they're for sure going to hit 15, they're going to hit 20 home runs at the end of the season, because that's the way this ballpark plays, but allows them to be better in the long run on the road. Now, I mean, I realize, again, as much as I give Andy McPhail credit and Duquette less, McPhail put that structure of the team together. I get that. But Duquette has doubled down on it over and over again. So, here's the question. Imagine what this club will look like right now with Nelson Cruz in the lineup as opposed to Mark Trumbo. How much more effective this club would be. They had opportunities to do that, to make some other choices. And, hey, maybe Tim Beckham is a first step towards that. I don't know.
But part of this is watching the Parker Bridwells go on and the Rodriguezes and the Davies, and we go through the list of the guys. And that's the real problem. The real problem is that they have not augmented their pitching. I will say Nelson Cruz at the end, $56 million sounded like a lot of money. I would have signed him certainly before I would have given Chris Davis the money. But this is the hodgepodge of the way the team is owned, the way the team is structured, the way the team is run, and Duquette then has to go out and fix the plumbing for a house that he didn't build most of the time.
In the long run, what we're talking about are the choices of scouting, a scouting department that doesn't recognize the talent they have within their organization, and the choices to keep some players and let others go. And, I mean, the Orioles, you look at the guys they've let go and the guys they've chosen to keep, and there's room for conjecture. There's room for speculation on how well they actually know their own organization. Now, they kept, Scope, Machado, Trey Mancini. I get it. Zach Britton is the best closer in the game, although I still believe he should be starting. And if you believe that the hype, there's some young guys on the farm right now who could be long-term help. So, I mean, I recognize that all is not lost here. That's not what I'm telling you. But the future, the decisions of the next few months, maybe the next few days, are going to go a long way to determine what the long-term implication of whether or not this team can contend in 2019 and 2020, realistically. Not like this season where they made a decision to say we're in contention and they haven't been since late May. But the decisions they make in the next few days may determine how far they can go in 19 and 20. And maybe for years to come, we'll have to see what comes of it.
I don't see them throwing a towel in on anything. I really don't. I mean, and I don't really think they're the type of team, even in the offseason, where Duquette can go down the hall to the old man and get him to check off on dealing Britton or Machado at the winter meetings. I just find that to be very far-fetched because I've watched this for 25 years. They're not a very creative organization in that way.
Well, I mean, he could deal them, but they're not going to get as much. Desperation of the moment would have allowed them to get more in July than I think they would have in December. And then realistically, I mean, you're just simply talking about the length of contract. You would have gotten more out of it. Another organization gets more out of Britton and Machado if they have in the fourth season and a half, as opposed to one remaining season, knowing that it's a lame duck contract. So I'm not saying that he can't trade them in the offseason. But, the thing is, it's sort of a betrayal of the next season that way, right? I mean, if you say we decided we were good enough to win this year, and they really weren't, and
never ever look like they were. I mean, maybe in April at 22-10, you'd say yes, but that was fool's gold, obviously, right?
Yeah, and then going into next year, I mean, I guess if they find some guys that can pitch. But that doesn't seem like that's a realistic expectation at this point. I mean, I guess he's done it before. To trade them in the offseason without trading them in July feels like that doesn't make much sense to me. In the philosophy they're moving with. So I don't know, Ness. I mean, I'm not telling you it's easy and every decision is going to be made perfectly. What I'm telling you is that the moves that they've made in the last few weeks, along with 2013 and along with 2015, when the club really didn't have a chance to compete, and they made moves in 13 and 15, giving away young pitching that has come back to haunt them dramatically. And even in this year, where yes, they went and got Beckham, which might be a good move for the future. We'll see. It might be. But Jeremy Helkson, I don't think either one of us believes that he's going to be here next year. And even if he is, I'm not sure that's a good thing. We'll have to see. But Duquette, I question the moves that he's made long term in terms of the health of this organization because I don't think they've been particularly sound.
He is Alan McCallum, covering all things Orioles, and with us for the better part of 2 decades here. And hey, Machado gave my mom a little gift on Friday night, right? Hitting the walk-off grand slam. That will be memorable. But for where we are with Machado at this point, and what is your prescription? Is the prescription really an off-season deal for him? I mean, is that where this thing's going to go, or are they going to play this thing out and literally get nothing for him?
I don't know what the Orioles are going to do. I can tell you what I would do. From this point moving forward, because the past is the past, I would take Machado. I would sit in a room with the organization, put the organization in the room, and make a determination of what each of these players, Machado, Scope, and Britton, are worth to us. Because those are the three, right? I mean, basically. I guess you could include Tillman in there, but at this point, I actually pretty sure Tillman will be back next year because they believe in him, that they'll get him for cheap, and probably on a 1-year pillow deal. And if he's awful, it's no great shakes.
The interesting thing, would anybody else be interested in him? And certainly with the Orioles' reputation, I'm sure there's organizations out there that believe they can fix an Oriole guy who's had problems. And, velocity, location, he was off with everything on Sunday. But, somewhere out there's an organization that says, we'll figure him out and get his ERA down to 4, and, we'll get 26 starts out of him next year.
I guess that's certainly possible. I don't know. We'll see what the price is going to be. But, I'd sit in the room and determine what each of these players, we can truly afford to pay each of these players. You make that decision, and then in the off-season, early in the off-season, you sit down with their representation, and you say, this is our offer for Manny Machado, for Zach Britton. Maybe not so much for Scope, because Scope's got a little bit more time. But they say yes or no, and if that, I'm sure Manny probably wouldn't take it. I don't know about Britton, and I don't know about Scope, but if they don't take it, trade them. Do whatever you can to trade them, get whatever you can for them, and make the decision to start to break up the club. If you get them, great. Then you move forward. That's what I would do, because the Orioles are approaching a desperation point for the future. They are. Just in terms of the core of the club, and what's going to be here. And those guys are going to make or break the future as it's currently constituted for the Orioles. Is it likely that Manny's going to take that deal? I mean, I guess it depends on how much and for how many years. He's probably young enough that he could sign a 7-year deal and still have another big contract on the back end. So maybe it's benefits Manny to not sign for 10 or 12 years somewhere because he'll be young enough to get another big payday. I don't know. But that's the way I would handle it. And because the Orioles don't have a lot of room to him and haw through 2018 with those guys. So if they take that approach, then we'll know before the winter's over what they're going to be for 2018 and what kind of future they might have. Meaning it'll be 2 or 3 years before they compete again, or they've got their guys and they're going to move forward, essentially with the core of this club intact. Do I think the Orioles are going to do that? No, I don't think they will. But that's how I would handle it. Manny Machado speaking.
Right, okay. Alan McCallum joining us here, our longtime Oriole dude. And to the rest of this, boy, this is a real foot race. Seeing the Angels come in here, and you talk about teams, the Angels and the Twins were the teams back on, July 31st. We're like, well, they're not in it. I remember talking to several people out there in Anaheim thinking they're not in it. Well, they're in it now, and all of a sudden the rest of the division, Tampa and Toronto as well, falling apart on this side. This is going to be a fascinating little run to the end. I have no idea how this is going to shake out and who's going to be playing in that wild card game.
Well, and a couple weeks ago you talked about how you were surprised the Orioles were still in it, and the reason they've been is because nobody is particularly good. I mean, everybody's sort of riding losing streaks and winning streaks and hoping the winning streaks outweigh. I mean, the Mariners went through, I think, a 6-game losing streak, and then they won 4 in a row, right? So, I mean, there's nobody in this wild card hunt, with maybe the Yankees being the exception, that's really particularly good. They all have massive flaws, and it's just going to be who beats down the others to or sort of limps their way to the end. Which is why I was saying to you that even when if you look at the math and say the Orioles are in the race, I mean, this isn't. And again, unless it's the Yankees, none of these clubs will remind anybody of the early Colorado Rockies, early 2000s Colorado Rockies that went on a mad run in late August and September to wrestle the wild card away in the National League, and that run got them to the World Series. I mean, that we've seen the Marlins do that. We've seen the Rockies do that. We've seen some clubs in years past, not necessarily. We saw the Kansas City Royals do that, basically, in 2014. These clubs that started off slow, couldn't find their way, and then got hot and ran to the finish line in seasons. None of these clubs that are vying for that second wild card spot in the American League constitute that. So, I mean, it's hard to imagine any of these ball clubs jumping up and beating a division winner. I mean, it can certainly happen. That's the glory of playing the games. But it seems unlikely. So, I mean, there are a lot of clubs that are in contention because there are a lot of clubs that are pretty mediocre that are vying for it. So, I told you a couple weeks ago that, I mean, for me, just getting to the wild card game wasn't enough. I mean, for the Orioles to make that decision worthwhile, they had to look at themselves in the eyes and say, can we truly go deep into the postseason and get ourselves to the World Series? And then nobody could realistically look at that and say, yes. Can the Angels? I mean, they have Mike Trout and Albert Pujols, and a little better pitching. I mean, if you have Mike Trout, anything can happen. He's that kind of impactful player. The Mariners have a Robinson Cano and a Nelson Cruz who can get hot and carry a team, I suppose. The Minnesota Twins, I mean, they're too young to really even to know what that club is, but they haven't gotten out of it yet. So, I mean, I guess stranger things could happen.
They got a great manager, I know that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there are several pieces in this. I'm not sure that I would believe any of them have that kind of run in them. But Mike Scioscia's a pretty good manager too. And one of the things that the Angels have over a lot of these clubs is defense. I mean, they're a great defensive club. And sometimes if you don't have great starting pitching or a great bullpen, the defense pulls you through. And we've seen that just with the Orioles, who in years past have been able to boast that.
And they have Parker Bridwell, too. Don't forget that.
It's hard to forget that right now, Ness.
He is Alan McCallum, Alan at WNST.net. Alan, keep the faith around here and chill out. We're still in this for at least another week, but maybe the next time we get together, they really won't be in the race anymore. We're teetering on that, aren't we?
Yeah. Hey, look, before I go, this was a weekend to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the opening of Camden Yards.
Sure.
And that was a time, and I don't know if that was the team, but that was certainly an era with players that made me fall in love with the Baltimore Orioles and baseball, and actually led me to you, basically. I have a lot of memories at Camden Yards. Probably the two best. And I think we all saw the big double that got hit in 2014 against the Tigers in Game 2. That was the most amazing moment I've personally ever witnessed in a sport. I saw them clinch against the Mariners in '97 at home to go to the ALCS. That's probably the third. The second most and the earliest really memorable thing was a game in '92 against the Blue Jays, and Joe Carter hit a ball over the fence that Mike Devereaux ran from center field on a dead sprint, and jumped over the wall in left center and brought the ball back. And that, to this day, is the greatest defensive catch I've ever seen. That's my best memory. And I mean, that's with, I saw, 21-31 in person. I saw opening day at Camden Yards. Sutcliffe throws a shutout. I mean, I saw all of that. But that catch is probably outside of the double in 2014 to win is my most sort of endearing regular season memory at Camden Yards.
June 5th, 1992. Sutcliffe threw the ball. And you can just Google it and watch it right out in front of the HGS sign in front of the bullpen. Devereaux scaled the wall to rob Joe Carter. You know, the memory you have of 1992, right, Alan McCallum?
Absolutely, and let's not forget that my first days as a reporter for cub reporter for WNST and the earlier iterations of the Nasty Nestor show. All happened at Camden Yards, so certainly a very special place in my life.
Well, I'm sorry I missed all the celebration this weekend. Obviously, with my mom, you know, Messina coming back and all these guys coming back, and I saw Sam Horn out there in home run derbies and Moose Milligan and all those guys. That was my first love, you know, of a team as a reporter and as being on the radio. It was my first year on radio. We're now 26 years into this, so I feel a little, you know, robbed. And by the way, you know, Glenn Davis not getting booed. Glenn was a great guy, and Glenn came into my studio and hung out, and he was a man of Jesus and a good human being who lost his trapezius muscle, and I know that there was a little bit of controversy about that, but, you know, that wasn't a great team, the 92 Orioles, but it was a team that everyone felt some kinship with because there were 3.6 million people at the ballpark. It was the first year. The Orioles were a real big deal around here in 1992.
No question, and look, I mean, for me, the Ripkins and Greg Olson and Randy Milligan and Joe Orsulak, Mike Devereaux, Brady Anderson, Chris Hoyles. I mean, those are the guys that, you know, I was 20, okay, and 89, I was 17, and you know they were still sort of icons to me at that point. So I mean, those were guys that sort of live in my collective memory,
in your baseball card memory,
yeah,
and your wiffle ball memory, right?
So I have good warm feelings about the club's sort of 89 through, let's say, 93 when they had that bunch of guys together. So seeing a lot of those guys back here this weekend, that was cool. That was cool, and it made me remember what it was like to be young and you know, the kind of hope that it's harder to stir up when you're 45. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know. I'm older than you, so I get it, Alan. Hey, man, take care of yourself. Hang in there, and I do hope the next time we chat a couple weeks from now that we still are in some semblance of a race around here. Only time will tell.
You and me both.
He is Alan McCallum, our longtime baseball insider, analyst, and pal, and paying respects to my mom, even though he left more beer for the rest of us down there in Essex on Friday. Big thanks to everyone out there who gave my mom some love over the weekend via social media, note, some sort of kindness. I had candles lit. We had all sorts of things going on, but we sent my mom home over the weekend, and I wrote a blog out at WNST.net, but we're back on the beat here this week. And anything you missed, you can find out in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be. Our morning newspaper ships digitally to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's all powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Guaranteed, even though the summer's getting away, fall's coming, and no better time than now to get yourself in shape and live a little longer, live a little happier, Planet Fitness. Last but never least, our breaking news is at the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis Kolatzis will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home. It is the SSV on WNST. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. We are throwing a big purple sky party over the River Thames the day before the Ravens play the Jaguars. If you're headed to London, toss me a note. Nasty at WNST.net. Also out on social media. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.